And now, ladies and gentlemen, the moment you've all been waiting for. Something that none of you are familiar with, that you may not be able to connect to, but something that, please indulge me, and I will talk about. Stress. So I asked at the beginning of the class who wants to experience less stress. Most of you put your hand up. Stress is a global, not American, not Western, global epidemic. By the end of this class, within 20 minutes, my hope is that we will all look like this. Minus the beer if you're not 21 yet. Now, the most important thing when dealing with stress, and again it is a global, very problematic epidemic. We talked about procrastination. This is what I do when I procrastinate. I go on Google Image and look for things like that. And then I tell myself it's part of your work, it's important. Yeah. It's all about cognitive reframing. When dealing with stress, what we need to do is take time out. Let me share with you, and again, I've talked about this before, but this is from the New England Journal of Medicine, an article written by our very own Richard Kedison. He's the head of mental health services here. In a recent national survey of 13,500 college students, nearly 45% reported being so depressed that they had difficulty functioning, and 94% reported feeling overwhelmed by everything they had to do. 45%. You know, people, when they asked me about the class at Harvard, the fact that it's a popular class, they said, is it because it's Harvard? It's because at Harvard there is more stress than... No, there isn't. In fact, when the Crimson did ask a similar question, they found at Harvard 47%. So really, no difference nationwide, regardless of which university, which college you go to. This is startling. I mean, I was shocked. I mean, I've been on college campus for the last 16 years. I know the situation, but I was even surprised by this number. And this is not the regular ups and downs that we go through 10 times a day. This is depression to the point of not functioning. How can we explain it? The 45%, by looking at the 94%. Let me be more specific. You see, students today clearly have too much to do. When I was a resident tutor in Leverett House, given that my PhD was also from the business school, my role was a pre-business tutor. So what I did, as many of you know, was I looked at students' resumes, at the CVs, and helped them hone it, make it better for the recruiting process or other processes where they were looking for work. And it really amazed me that just about every year, the resumes became more impressive. Smaller fonts, bigger titles, narrower margins. Each year. You know what very often the older generation says, who has gone to Harvard? They say, I wouldn't have gotten into Harvard today. It's true. It's unfortunate, but it's true. And I looked at these resumes and I was very impressed. And I said, wow. Until I noticed the price that students, you, me, were paying for the smaller fonts and narrower margins. And the price is that we feel overwhelmed, too much to do, stress, anxiety, and as a result of it, and there's a lot of data supporting this arrow, as a result of this, higher likelihood of depression. And this is what we see on college campuses. This is what we see around the country. This is what we see around the world. Because I'd recently returned from China, not very different from this. I recently came from Australia, very similar to this. Trying to fit in too many things into a little time, taking more courses, being part of more student organizations. And that exacts a price. Okay, here she is. The psychologist, the one and only Ellen DeGeneres, talking about the state of affairs.
I believe that someday sitcoms will be 30 seconds long. Because that's all we'll need, and that's all our attention span can take, because our attention span is shot. We've all got attention deficit disorder, or ADD, or OCD, or one of the disorders with 3 letters, because we don't have the time and patience to pronounce the entire disorder. That should be a disorder right there. TBD, too busy disorder. The weather is actually the happiest part of the news, because at some point you're going to hear something positive. You're going to hear, it's a beautiful day, or it's going to be a beautiful day. And it's nice to take in something positive, you know, because we hear all this negative stuff all the time, and we go out into the world and it's so chaotic, and not that we're going to notice if it's a beautiful day, we're moving too fast to even pay attention to that. And we need help to keep up with that pace, so we put a coffee shop here, and there's a coffee shop here, and a coffee shop here, and a coffee shop here, and the smallest coffee is a tall, and I'll have a coffee and a side of Red Bull, because I'm very, very busy. I've got TBD and I'm late for yoga. Hurry, hurry!
TBD should be part of the DSM. Really should be. We pay a very high price for this TBD. First of all, psychological health, one of the best predictors of depression. Physical health. Many doctors estimate that about 80% of our physical ailments are a result of stress, weakened immune system. And finally, today, this year, the number one cause for loss of days at work globally is something related to our psychology, whether it's stress or related emotions, feelings, experiences. It never used to be that in the past. Today, it's psychological reasons. And we pay a price both in terms of our productivity as well as creativity. Think back to the broaden and build theory. When we're stressed, we're more likely to narrow and constrict as opposed to think outside the box. All right, so what do we do with this stress? What do we do with it? Let's use positive psychology, because it really is a problem that we want to be able to deal with, that I know, certainly personally, it's a problem that I've dealt with for a very long time. So the conventional question, the traditional psychologist question was, why are so many people stressed? An important question, good question that yielded many great answers, but not enough. And then positive psychologists came in, and what they did was ask also the positive question. Just like when we talked about the research with at-risk population, just like Marva Collins asked a different question, because questions open up avenues, quests that we may have not seen before. And the question became, what do those who are successful and able to lead a healthy and happy life do? In other words, focusing on what works. In other words, focusing on the tip of the stem. Because while most people are stressed, not all of them are. There are people who are able to be successful and at the same time lead a healthy and happy life. What do they do? What is it about them? Here is what they do. What was found was that there are some distinguishing characteristics, 2 of them. They set rituals for themselves, and we talked about rituals in the past. The second thing that they do, and this is what I'm going to elaborate on now, the second thing that they do in addition to having rituals, whether it's a lot of rituals or a few rituals, depending on individual needs and differences, in addition to setting rituals, they particularly set rituals for both work and for recovery. Let me explain. What I'm going to say now is something that psychologists did not see before, because it was hidden, just like the children on the bus were hidden by the first question. It was only asking the second question that they noticed this. What they noticed was that these individuals ritualized work and recovery, and in essence, what they found, and this is the most surprising result to my mind in studying stress, is that stress was actually not the problem. We were looking in the wrong place. In fact, what they found was that stress was good for us. That stress actually cultivated resilience, strength, and helped us be happier in the long run. Wait a minute. What does that mean? Well, think about the following analogy. Think about the physical realm. What happens to you? What actually happens to you when you go to the gym? When you go to the gym, you lift weights. What are you doing to your muscle? You're stressing your muscle. In fact, you're tearing parts of it. There are micro tears in your cells. Now, is this a bad thing that you're doing that? Not at all. It's a good thing because you lift weights, and then 2 days later, you lift these weights again, and the next week you continue lifting these weights, and you do it for a month, and 2, and 4 months, and 6 months, and after a year of lifting weights, you begin to look like me. Or maybe not. So the stress part is actually good for us. What's the problem, though? When do the problems begin with stressing those muscles? It's when you lift weights, and a minute later you lift the same weights again, and again, and again, and again, and so on and so on. What would happen to you then if you don't take a break, whether it's a break between sessions or whether it's a day's break? What happens to you then? That's when you get injured. That's when you get hurt. That's when you actually tear or pull a muscle. That's when you become overworked, and that has psychological as well as physical effects. That's when you overtrain. In other words, the problem is not stress, not on the physical level, nor on the psychological level. The problem is lack of recovery. Individuals who are both successful, happy, thriving, flourishing, are ones who do experience stress. However, they also pay very close attention to recovery. Just like any athlete here in this room knows, you have tapering, you have time off before important games. You don't lift the same weights day in and day out. The same thing on the psychological level. If we don't take breaks, we will pay a price. On the physical level, we get injured. On the psychological level, we experience anxiety, ultimately, potentially, depression. Stress is fine, it's good, it's exciting at times if we also have recovery. I want to share with you now some more ideas from the book that I talked about before, The Power of Full Engagement, that again I highly recommend you read, maybe over spring break. And what Tony Schwartz and Jim Lohr talk about is that what we need to do is change our perception of our day from being marathon runners to being sprinters. From going on and on and on to sprinting, recovery. Sprinting, recovery. That understanding changed my life. You see, I was a marathon runner, metaphorically, meaning at work. I used to work 14 hours a day. I loved my work. I worked extremely hard. And then I decided to get married and to have children. And I knew that things would change as a result of that. And I said, okay, I'll have to compromise. I'll have to work less than 14 hours a day if I want to maintain a healthy relationship with my spouse and with my kids. And it disappointed me to some extent, but I had my priorities, and I made a choice. And then I met Tony Schwartz, who, within a few minutes, changed my perception, my understanding of what my day can and ought to look like. And when he explained to me this, it made immediate sense. I started to implement it. And today, I may not be as productive as I was when I worked for 14 hours a day, but very close to it. and I'm certainly happier, and I'm more creative than I was when I was a marathoner. And here is his suggestion. One of the things that he talked about in the book. This is a ritual that I recommend. And it is, have 60 to 120 minutes, so around 90 minutes of sprint. Work, concentrate, focus, hard, go for it. And then, after that, after you sprint with as little distractions as possible, have 15 minutes or so of recovery. What psychologists have found is that essentially we're able to sprint, to focus, according to our biorhythms, between 60 and 120 minutes. It differs. Some people are more 60, others can do it for 2 hours. Average, 90 minutes. After you sprint, take 15 minutes off, whether it's for meditation, listening to your favorite piece of music, whether it's for going to the gym. It can be, of course, more than 15 minutes, but at least 15 minutes. Having lunch, having a break, and during lunch not doing emails and being on the phone, which only adds to the stress. Really relaxing with friends or by ourselves. And when we have a day that's structured with sprint, recovery, that's when we can sustain, when we have the highest levels of energy, when we get the most done, and when we're happiest. This is my day now. My day comprises sprint, recovery, sprint, recovery. I'm able to get so much more done. My ideal day, work day, is 90 minutes, 15-minute meditation, 90 minutes, lunch, 90 minutes, workout, 90 minutes, home with the family. Actually, net, I work for 6 hours a day. But in those 6 hours, I get more than I would have in 10. Not to mention the fact that I'm happier and more creative doing it. The key when doing it is to maintain flexibility. Because, again, the ideal day for me would be that. However, there are other things. You know, I travel a lot. I teach a class. And during those times, let's say I'm not by my computer writing or doing research. And again, because these are important things to me. So what I've done, for example, is say, I want 10 90-minute sessions, the ritual of 10 90-minute sessions a week. Some of these 90-minute sessions are on a flight, and that's okay. Some of these 90-minute sessions are at home or in my office. But at least 10, usually more than 10 90-minute sessions a week. And when I have that, I'm happy, I feel good, I get a lot done. Also, the ritual of yoga. Maintain flexibility there. So one of the things that were difficult for me was to introduce a 45-minute or a 1-hour session a day. And now yoga is important for me. It makes me feel good, and I'll talk about the research around it after break. So what I started to do was breaking down yoga sessions, and now part of my 15 minutes in between is a 15-minute yoga, sun salutations, for 15 minutes. And then the next 15 minutes is another part of a yoga practice. So I break yoga into 2 or 3 sessions a day instead of 1. Again, the flexibility of a ritual. And that for me works very well. The key is, and I'm going to end with this, the key is to attain multi-level recovery. First, recovery on the micro level. 15 minutes meditation, 1 hour of gym, whatever it is, a lunch break. Mezzo level recovery, and that is a good night's sleep. We'll talk about the importance of sleep. Sleep is a good investment for well-being, happiness, as well as for your creativity, for your memory. Sleep is important. A day off during the week. Even God needed a day off. Implemented in our lives. And finally, those vacations. Remember J.P. Morgan, I can do the work of a year in 9 months, but not in 12. Recreation leads to creation. So remember that. Remember that. Next week, we meet on Tuesday here for the midterm. Thursday, we don't have class. And remember the vacation. Take time, enjoy it, and good luck. See you after break.